This is TWiT.
So you have a Sonos speaker, or you have a Google Home speaker.
I have one of those.
Okay, so you've got that.
A few of those.
Now, do you use the ability to listen to music in multiple rooms?
Heck yes,
option?
I do. It's a great feature. I love it.
You know, that reminds me of something. Reminds me of what Sonos does with multi-room audio.
Yeah, well, I remember when the Google Home's got that feature, I was like, oh, I thought you needed a Sonos to do that.
And Sonos,
Ding.
Sonos has been thinking a little bit about that. In fact, Sonos is accusing Google and Amazon of stealing its smart speaker technology. They're a little peeved, and I am curious to learn more. Joining us is Adi Robertson of The Verge to tell us all about Sonos and its case. Hello. Welcome.
Hi.
Hiya. So I think we should start off with the big thing here. The question that I had kind of going into this is, what is the actual lawsuit alleging? What is it that Sonos says that Google is stealing from Sonos?
Basically, Sonos has a list of patents. It's 5, although Sonos is really alleging that Google's sort of stealing everything, but it's covering 5 patents that deal with things like syncing, if you have a group of speakers, syncing their volume collectively, other things that relate to connecting these speakers over a local area network instead of like wiring them together, the sort of key things that Sonos is known for, basically. And Sonos spoke to the New York Times and alleged that actually it's like 100 patents. They've been warning Google about this for years. They also made claims about Amazon, but they're keeping the case itself pretty focused at this moment.
Just focused on Google. Now, I saw some conversation there that the reason they're kind of keeping it focused on Google is they don't necessarily have the funds to go after 2 big tech companies at once. And I'm curious if that's something that you had read as well.
That is in the New York Times piece.
Okay.
It doesn't quite directly say funds, but it says, they didn't think that they could tangle with 2 tech giants at once.
That makes sense. I certainly don't think I could either. Now, this, I think, is the fascinating part of it. Sonos is specifically sort of citing the fact that it had a partnership in 2013 to provide Google Play music support on the Sonos devices. And apparently, allegedly, it was at that point that Google started to use or had access to Sonos's technology. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Right. So the reporting says that, yes, Sonos, it started working with Google in 2013, and it wanted to add support for Google's music service, and it sort of handed over its blueprints to how to design the speakers with these wireless capabilities. And then a couple of years later, Google releases its own Chrome audio plugin, which has the same kind of multi-room syncing. And then, of course, over the years after that, it starts rolling out its home speakers and control, like app support for them on its Pixel devices and things like that. And those are all covered in the lawsuit.
Okay. And in this report, you also talk about so the report describes an attempt to make a smart speaker that could simultaneously support multiple voice assistant platforms. That I remember. I remember Sonos sort of saying, hey, we're going to, no matter which assistant you want to use, our device, our speaker is going to support that. So you could say, hey, Alexa, or hey, Boo Boo, or whoever you decide to use, and that voice assistant would work with it. But then apparently Google and Amazon both kind of said, you're going to have to pick one or the other because we don't want to confuse our customers and give them access to all of these. So it almost feels like there's more to the story in the sense that there's some friction that already exists in this space. And I'm curious, in your reporting and your research of this, if you kind of came across more than just the, hey, you stole our patents, if there's kind of some bad blood going on in these companies.
So there's a sort of ongoing story, apparently, of Sonos warning Google over the years that it was infringing on these patents, allegedly. And then Sonos claiming that Google sort of retaliated against it using access to Google Assistant. Google Assistant is a big sticking point in the New York Times reporting, where basically Sonos warned Google, and then Google sort of clamped down on the terms to using Google Assistant, arguing that they needed to turn over more detail about their products earlier. And then, like you mentioned, they wanted to make a speaker that could support multiple assistants, and they are claiming that both Google and Amazon absolutely hated this idea, and that Google apparently hated it more, and that Google has had a long-running ban on its speakers, has had a long-running ban on Assistant appearing next to any other sort of big company's voice platform. Okay. Amazon, just for the record, denied that it told them to stop putting simultaneous support on the speaker.
Interesting. Now, what has Google said in response to this? I mean, there's a lot that we've heard from Sonos, which makes sense. I mean, they're actively the ones sort of accusing Google, but has Google said anything in return?
Google has done what would pretty much expected that it was going to do, which is just said that we're prepared to defend these in court, but this is not infringement. Its exact statement is that, just a second, is that it's just upset that there were, quote, lawsuits instead of continuing negotiations in good faith.
Interesting.
And then just this morning, I believe it was this morning, Vice President of Amazon, Dave Limp, is also kind of responding to this. Meanwhile, Amazon, like you said, totally out of the crosshairs right now. But pretty certain that if Sonos is successful in going after Google, then they turn their attention to Amazon, and that would strengthen the case against Amazon if they were to win against Google, I guess. But we won't know that for a while. I guess I don't know the strength of the case at this point. I'm kind of surprised that Sonos wouldn't make a step, if this has been a beef that's been happening for the last three years, make a step earlier than this. Does that spell anything about the Sonos's ability to compete in this space? Some people are like, compete instead of litigate, which is the common refrain, I suppose.
There are a lot of things that could be going on. Part of the issue is that Sonos has actually been filing patent lawsuits against other companies, mostly smaller audio companies. It sued and had a pretty successful case against Denon Electronics. And then earlier this year, it sued the company Blue Sound, or the makers of the Blue Sound speakers. And so they've been kind of an ongoing drip of litigation. I think one person has also potentially connected it to the fact that they recently acquired a company that makes its own privacy-focused smart voice system. And so theoretically, they're a little bit less dependent on Assistant at this point.
Yeah, that's Snips, which is an AI voice platform that Sonos has acquired. And the whole sort of pro of this is that it's very privacy-focused and would give them the opportunity to do this, to create a private by design voice assistant that runs on the edge.
And so they would get rid of Assistant and ALEXA?
Yes, because in theory, because essentially running on the edge means running on that device itself. You don't have to have a server connection there to figure that out. Now, interestingly, this, as a reporter of smart home technology and smart technology in general, I'm often talking about the different voice assistants and the different smart speakers that are on on the market. And Apple makes a device called the HomePod, and it's sort of a joke within the space to talk about how the HomePod doesn't do very well in competition with these other things. But interestingly, it is not mentioned among the other devices or among the other companies that Sonos is going after. So they're going after Google, but they may soon go after Amazon. Why are we not hearing that they may soon also go after Apple for the same thing?
I mean, I don't know how closely Sonos has worked with Apple, if they've worked as closely as they have with Google. I think it is also that Google is sort of the giant with its voice platform and with its whole sort of giant device ecosystem. And Sonos seems like it has like you've said, sort of specific bad blood with Google.
Gotcha.
And so it is plausible that that's why we're seeing this first.
That makes sense. Yeah. And, I can right now, if I wanted to, pull out my phone and control all of the Echo devices in my house with the volume control for all of them, play music to all of them. Same thing goes if I had a bunch of different Google Home speakers. But Apple uses a separate technology called AirPlay that sort of exists outside of that space. And so I can see how that also, it wouldn't be as easy to make that argument, given that AirPlay has existed for a long, long time, whereas this multi-room audio feature that both Amazon and Google have added does seem to have come along after they partnered with Sonos for these different things.
Right.
Interestingly, I saw a conversation that Sonos kind of, when it was first, I think it was Alex Lindsay on MacBreak Weekly, kind of talking about how Sonos in the beginning sort of cobbled together this technology, and it was, we're kind of figuring it out as we go along, but we're going to make really good sounding speakers. People will buy those really good sounding speakers. They'll get them in their homes, and that part will be great. And we'll worry about the networking to make sure it all works together afterward. And so now it's at a place where it's sort of perfected that technology. It's seeing other companies use that technology, and it's like, we went there first. And this where this conversation sort of takes place. So
and undercut them on cost.
And yes, because Sonos speakers are very expensive. That's the other thing. You can get a lot of Echo devices without having to spend a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Now, the one thing that I found really fascinating about this report, not only is Sonos going after Google for this, which already, that's a big tech company, but what is it that Sonos is asking for a sales ban on many things, right?
Yeah, it's the Home Max, Home Mini. It is some of these things are not actually running anymore, like the Chromecast audio. It's also Pixel devices, which they are referring to as controllers, because they are preloaded with software that then you can control these other devices with. And I believe there's also some Nest products.
So that means all of Google's Pixel phones, they want to ban from sale.
Yes, and that's part of, there are two cases. There's a case in California court, and then there's a case with the International Trade Commission. So these are going to sort of proceed separately, and we're not sure whether or not there's going to be a ban on it. But yes, that's what they're arguing for. I believe the Chromecast is also on that list.
Wow.
And the Chromecast Ultra.
That's like almost all of Google's hardware division.
You just circle everything.
Yes.
What would
the
you like
diagram,
to ask
they're
for a
pretty
ban?
much all in there. Yeah.
Everything's banned.